Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord. Welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today we've got two new cards to talk about. The new Produce SSR for Asahi, as well as the Support SSR for Nichika. Now keep in mind that both of these cards are permanent. Once this banner is over, both cards will be added to the pool of SSRs for the foreseeable future. So you don't have to go too hard for these characters if you don't necessarily need to. If you are somebody that's willing to put a little bit of money in, the paid-only step-up can guarantee you a copy of Asahi or Nichika at a 50-50, so you can take your bets there if you are somebody that's willing to put a little bit of money in. That all being said, let's go ahead and get things started by talking about Asahi, who was initially a vocal unit that upgrades into a visual unit. Her initial appeal is a vocal 3.5 that fortifies her vocal buffs, grants a vocal visual 30% buff for 10 turns, and a visual 5% buff for 5 turns. This links into a vocal visual 50% buff for 4 turns. The upgraded appeal at 3 stars is a visual 4.5 that fortifies your visual buffs, grants you a vocal visual 60% buff for 10 turns, and a visual 10% buff for 5 turns. This links into the same vocal visual 50% up for 4 turns. For her passives, the only really notable ones are her 2 and 4 star passive. Her 2-star passive is a vocal visual 85% up if you have 3 or more active visual up buffs. This has a 30% chance to activate twice. Her 4-star passive is a visual 85% up if you are running the full Stray Light lineup, and it has a 20% chance to activate twice. Her memory appeal, when maxed out, is a visual 3.0 that scales based on removing vocal up buffs, that follows up with a visual 3.0 that scales based on removing visual buffs. Her total stat uncaps are a plus 250 to vocal and plus 300 to visual when maxed out. Asahi is a little weird, but not too unlike most other Stray Light cards. Her passives are serviceable, and her 3-star appeal at least is pretty okay for the value that it gives, especially considering the duration of the buffs and all. You'd still need to find more sources of vocal and visual up to max out her memory appeal, since you would have to still get at least 1 vocal and 1 visual to max out that memory appeal even if you use both of hers. Not the most impossible thing, but it is something still worth considering. Though I would say that she's not ideally your center either way. I would say as a unit, she's roughly about a B-. I think that there is some small level of playability to her, but I would not consider it to be very high priority. I would maybe be leaning towards C+, but I just kind of want to be fair to the card. As a center, I would say she's anywhere from C+ to B-, kind of in a similar vein. It is theoretically playable, but it might just be a little too annoying to get going correctly. And there are certainly much better options for memory appeals you can choose that are a little less annoying depending on the type of build that you're trying to run. So next then, we have Nichika, who is a pure vocal unit. Nichika's masteries include Vocal Mastery SP reaching plus 15 at level 80, otherwise plus 12 at level 70, plus 6 at level 30. She has Vocal Mastery Vocal Limit Up reaching plus 10 at level 75, plus 6 at level 65, or plus 3 at level 55. She does also then have Vocal Mastery Stamina, reaching plus 3 at level 80, otherwise plus 1 at level 65. Speaking of, level 65, in other words 1 star, is a pretty okay place if you're really only concerned about the stat uncap and the stamina. But if you get her to 3 star, or level 75, that's more ideal if you want that absolutely better vocal uncap, and works out pretty well if you already have the EX skill set up for her to show up in the vocal room, or whichever room you really need her in more often. Though, considering her SP and stamina masteries, you want her to be hugging the vocal room as much as possible. So do keep that in mind if you are intending to invest into this support. Now, as for the rest of what she does, her 4-star appeal is a vocal 3.0 that increases Mikoto's appeal strength by 0.5 for 2 turns. Her passives only really has 2 that are notable. Her 2-star passive is a vocal 90% up if you are at 74% mental or less. It has a 20% chance to activate twice. And her event passive, which is only available after seeing the commute during your produce run, is a vocal 50% up if it is turn 2 or later, and has a 20% chance to activate twice. Nichika is fine, but not really outstanding in any particular way. The biggest thing going for her is her relatively easy to use passive, and the plus 10 to your stat uncap if you are either producing Mikoto or happen to have a vocal Mikoto that is sharing the same room as her at that time. And what's great is that with perfects, that means it increases up to +20, which is actually a pretty fair amount of stat uncap from one card. While she's not absolutely a necessary card for functionality or for any particular builds right now, there is some interesting options that you could theoretically play around if you're looking for higher stat uncap, and more than likely, in terms of the story, this should be good food for those that are a big fan of Shis. So, that will do it for the video today, real short one. Next time we'll be talking about whatever banner comes next. We're still pretty early in the gacha cycle, so we don't really have any sort of hint as to what could be next, so we'll have to be surprised together. Another thing that is also worth noting before we finish up here, since we've got a little extra time, is that there is currently a 6.5 anniversary banner that is available to everybody. It is not paid only. And this banner, if you go all the way on the steps, which I am slowly working my way there, I do not have a ton of gems left, but I'll do what I can for this to support things that I think are good. You get a handful of SSR tickets, including some limited-only SSRs, and there are plenty of limited SSRs in this pool. If you have 30,000 jewels to spare, this is a pretty decent banner to support, I would say. So do consider that as well if you're just kind of having a hole burn in your pocket and don't feel like pulling necessarily for the Asahi. Till the next one, I've been Cho. Thank you as always for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.